Hello, my kiddos. I just got off the phone with you guys, well, Skype with you guys, and now we're going to read the book. So, last time, the writers of Rohan, specifically Eomer, gave Aragorn and Legolas and Gimli 2 horses to go find their friends. So that's where we are now. With that, they parted. Very swift were the horses of Rohan, when after a little while, I read that part last time, never mind, a little further down. As they rode forward, the day was overcast. Low gray clouds came over the world. A mist shrouded the sun. Ever nearer, the tree-clad slopes of Fangorn loomed, slowly darkling as the sun went west. They saw no sign of any trail to right or left, but here and there they passed single orcs, fallen in their tracks as they ran, with gray feathered arrows sticking in back or throat. At last, as the afternoon was waning, they came to the eaves of the forest, and in an open glade, among the first trees, they found the place of the great burning. The ashes were still hot and smoking. Beside it was a great pile of helms and mail, cloven shields and broken swords, bows and darts and other gear of war. Upon a stake in the middle was set a great goblin head. Upon its shattered helm the white badge could still be seen. Further away, not far from the river, where it came streaming out from the edge of the wood, there was a mound. It was newly raised. The raw earth was covered with fresh-cut turfs. About it were planted 15 spears. Aragorn and his companions searched for far and wide about the field of battle, but the light faded, and evening soon drew down, dim and misty. By nightfall, they had discovered no trace of Merry and Pippin. "We can do no more," said Gimli sadly. "We have been set many riddles since we came to Tol Brandir, but this is the hardest to unravel. I would guess that the burned bones of the hobbits are now mingled with the orcs. It will be hard news for Frodo if he lives to hear it, and hard too for the old hobbit who waits in Rivendell. Elrond was against their coming." "But Gandalf was not," said Legolas. "But Gandalf chose to come himself, and he was the first to be lost," answered Gimli. "His foresight failed him." "The counsel of Gandalf was not founded on foreknowledge or safety, for himself or for others," said Aragorn. "There are some things that it is better to begin than to refuse, even though the end may be dark. But I shall not depart from this place yet. In any case, we must here await the morning light. A little way beyond the battlefield, they made their camp under a spreading tree. It looked like a chestnut, and yet it still bore many broad brown leaves of a former year. Like dry hands with long splayed fingers, they rattled mournfully in the night breeze. Gimli shivered. They had brought only one blanket apiece. "Let us light a fire," he said. "I care no longer for the danger. Let the orcs come as thick as summer moths round a candle." "If those unhappy hobbits are astray in the woods, it might draw them hither," said Legolas. "And it might draw other things, neither orc nor hobbit," said Aragorn. "We are near to the mountain marches of the traitor Saruman. Also, we are on the very edge of Fangorn, and it is perilous to touch the trees of that wood, it is said." "But the Rohirrim made a great burning here yesterday," said Gimli. "And they felled trees for the fire, as can be seen. Yet they passed the nights after safely here, when their labor was ended." "They were many," said Aragorn, "and they do not heed the wrath of Fangorn, for they come here seldom, and they do not go under the trees. But our paths are likely to lead us into the very forest itself. So have a care, cut no living wood." "There is no need," said Gimli. "The riders have left chip and bow and bough enough, and there is dead wood lying in plenty." He went off to gather fuel, and busied himself with building and kindling a fire. But Aragorn sat silent with his back to the great tree, deep in thought, and Legolas stood alone in the open, looking towards the profound shadows of the wood, leaning forward as one who listens to voices calling from a distance. When the dwarf had a small bright blaze going, the three companions drew close to it and sat together, shrouding the light with their hooded forms. Legolas looked up at the boughs of the tree reaching out above them. "Look," he said, "the tree is glad of the fire. It may have been that the dancing shadows tricked their eyes, but certainly to each of the companions the boughs appeared to be bending this way and that, so as to come above the flames. While the upper branches were stooping down, the brown leaves now stood out stiff, and rubbed together like many cold, cracked hands, taking comfort in the warmth. There was a silence, for suddenly the dark and unknown forest, so near at hand, made itself feel as a great brooding presence, full of secret purpose. After a while Legolas spoke again. "Celeborn warned us not to go far into Fangorn," he said. "Do you know why, Aragorn? What are the fables of the forest that Boromir had heard?" "I have heard many tales in Gondor and elsewhere," said Aragorn, "but if it were not for the words of Celeborn, I should deem them only fables that men have made as true knowledge fades. I had thought of asking you what was the truth of the matter, and if an elf of the woods does not know, how shall a man answer?" "You have journeyed further than I," said Legolas. "I have heard nothing of this in my own land, save only songs that tell how the Onodrim, that men call Ents, dwelt here long ago. For Fangorn is old, old even as the elves would reckon it." "Yes, it is old," said Aragorn, "as old as the forest by the Barrow Downs, and it is far greater. Elrond said that the two are akin, the last strongholds of the mighty woods of the elder days, in which the firstborn roamed while men still slept. Yet Fangorn holds some secret of its own. What it is I do not know." "And I do not wish to know," said Gimli. "Let nothing that dwells in Fangorn be troubled on my account." They now drew lots for the watches, and the lot for the first watch fell to Gimli. The others lay down. Almost at once sleep laid hold on them. "Gimli," said Aragorn drowsily, "remember, it is perilous to cut bough or twig from a living tree in Fangorn, but do not stray far in search of dead wood. Let the fire die, rather. Call me at need." With that he fell asleep. Legolas already lay motionless, his fair hands folded upon his breast, his eyes unclosed, blending living night and deep dream, as is the way with the elves. Gimli sat hunched by the fire, running his thumb thoughtfully along the edge of his axe. The tree rustled. There was no other sound. Suddenly Gimli looked up, and there, just on the edge of the firelight, stood an old bent man, leaning on a staff, and wrapped in a gray cloak. His wide-brimmed hat was pulled down over his eyes. Gimli sprang up, too amazed for the moment to cry out, though at once the thought flashed into his mind that Saruman had caught them. Both Aragorn and Legolas, roused by this sudden movement, sat up and stared. The old man did not speak or make a sign. "Well, father, what can we do for you?" said Aragorn, leaping to his feet. "Come and be warm if you are cold." He strode forward, but the old man was gone. There was no trace of him to be found near at hand, and they did not dare to wander far. The moon had set, and the night was very dark. Suddenly Legolas gave a cry. "The horses! The horses!" The horses were gone. They had dragged their pickets and disappeared. For some time the three companions stood still and silent, troubled by this new stroke of ill fortune. They were under the eaves of Fangorn, and endless leagues lay between them and the men of Rohan, their only friends in this wide and dangerous land. As they stood, it seemed to them that they heard, far off in the night, the sound of horses whinnying and neighing. Then all was quiet again, except for the cold rustle of the wind. "Well, they are gone," said Aragorn at last. "We cannot find them or catch them, so that if they do not return of their own will, we must do without them. We started on our feet, and we have those still." "Feet," said Gimli, "but we cannot eat them as well as walk on them." He threw some fuel on the fire and slumped down beside it. "Only a few hours ago you were unwilling to sit on a horse of Rohan," laughed Legolas. "You will make a rider yet." "It seems unlikely that I shall have the chance," said Gimli. "If you wish to know what I think," he began again after a while, "I think it was Saruman. Who else? Remember the words of Eomer. He walks about like an old man hooded and cloaked. Those were the words. He has gone off with our horses, or scared them away, and here we are. There is more trouble coming to us, mark my words." "I marked them," said Aragorn, "but I marked also that this old man had a hat, not a hood. Still, I do not doubt that you guess right, and that we are in peril here, by night or day. Yet in the meantime there is nothing that we can do but rest, while we may. I will watch for a while now, Gimli. I have more need of thought than of sleep." The night passed slowly. Legolas followed Aragorn, and Gimli followed Legolas, and their watches wore away. But nothing happened. The old man did not appear again, and the horses did not return. End of chapter 2. And now chapter 3, the Uruk-hai. Pippin lay in a dark and troubled dream. It's Pippin. It seemed that he could hear his own small voice echoing in black tunnels, calling "Frodo! Frodo!" But instead of Frodo, hundreds of hideous orc faces grinned at him out of the shadows. Hundreds of hideous arms grasped at him from every side. Where was Merry? He woke. Cold air blew on his face. He was lying on his back. Evening was coming and the sky above was growing dim. He turned and found that the dream was little worse than the waking. His wrists, legs, and ankles were tied with cords. Beside him Merry lay, white-faced, with a dirty rag bound across his brows. All about them sat or stood a great company of orcs. Slowly in Pippin's aching head, memory pieced itself together and became separated from dream shadows. Of course, he and Merry had run off into the woods. What had come over them? Why had they dashed off like that, taking no notice of old Strider? They had run a long way, shouting. He could not remember how far or how long, and then suddenly they had crashed right into a group of orcs. They were standing, listening, and they did not appear to see Merry and Pippin until they were almost in their arms. Then they yelled, and dozens of other goblins had sprung out of the trees. Merry and he had drawn their swords, but the orcs did not wish to fight, and they had tried only to lay hold of them, even when Merry had cut off several of their arms and hands. Good old Merry. Then Boromir had come leaping through the trees. He had made them fight. He slew many of them, and the rest fled, but they had not gone far on the way back when they were attacked again, by 100 orcs at least, some of them very large, and they shot a rain of arrows, always at Boromir. Boromir had blown his great horn till the woods rang, and at first the orcs had been dismayed and had drawn back, but when no answer but echoes came, they had attacked more fiercely than ever. Pippin did not remember much more. His last memory was of Boromir leaning against a tree, plucking out an arrow. Then darkness fell suddenly. "I suppose I was knocked on the head," he said to himself. "I wonder if poor Merry is much hurt. What has happened to Boromir? Why didn't the orcs kill us? Where are we, and where are we going?" He could not answer the questions. He felt cold and sick. "I wish Gandalf had never persuaded Elrond to let us come," he thought. "What good have I been? Just a nuisance, a passenger, a piece of luggage. And now I have been stolen, and I am just a piece of luggage for the orcs. I hope Strider or someone will come and claim us. But ought I to hope for it? Won't that throw out all the plans? I wish I could get free." He struggled a little, quite uselessly. One of the orcs sitting near laughed and said something to a companion in their abominable tongue. "Rest while you can, little fool," he said then to Pippin, in the common speech, which he made almost as hideous as his own language. "Rest while you can. We'll find use for your legs before long. You'll wish you had got none before we get home." "If I had my way, you'd wish you were dead now," said the other. "I'd make you squeak, you miserable rat." He stooped over Pippin, bringing his yellow fangs close to his face. He had a black knife with a long, jagged blade in his hand. "Lie quiet, or I'll tickle you with this," he hissed. "Don't draw attention to yourself, or I may forget my orders. Curse the Isengarders. Ugluk Bagronk Shah Pushdug Saruman Glob Bushhog Sky." That was Orcish. He passed into a long, angry speech in his own tongue that slowly died away into muttering and snarling. Terrified, Pippin lay still, though the pain at his wrists and ankles was growing, and the stones beneath him were boring into his back. To take his mind off himself, he listened intently to all he could hear. There were many voices round about, and though orc speech sounded at all times full of hate and anger, it seemed plain that something like a quarrel had begun, and was getting hotter. To Pippin's surprise, he found that much of the talk was intelligible. Many of the orcs were using ordinary language. Apparently the members of 2 or 3 quite different tribes were present, and they could not understand one another's orc speech. There was an angry debate concerning what they were to do now, which way they were to take, and what should be done with the prisoners. "There's no time to kill them properly," said one. "No time for play on this trip." "That can't be helped," said another. "But why not kill them quick? Kill them now. They're a cursed nuisance, and we're in a hurry. Evening's coming on, and we ought to get a move on." "Orders," said a third voice in a deep growl. "Kill all, but not the halflings. They are to be brought back alive as quickly as possible. That's my orders." "What are they wanted for?" asked several voices. "Why alive? Do they give good sport?" "No, I heard that one of them has got something that's wanted for the war, some elvish plot or other. Anyway, they'll both be questioned." "Is that all you know? Why don't we search them and find out? We might find something that we could use ourselves." "That is a very interesting remark," sneered a voice, softer than the others, but more evil. "I may have to report that. The prisoners are not to be searched or plundered. Those are my orders." "And mine too," said the deep voice, "alive and as captured. No spoiling. That's my orders." "Not our orders," said one of the earlier voices. "We have come all the way from the mines to kill and avenge our folk. I wish to kill and then go back north." All right, so that one came from Moria. "Then you can wish again," said the growling voice. "I am Ugluk. I command. I return to Isengard by the shortest road." "Is Saruman the master, or the great Eye?" said the evil voice. "We should go back at once to Lugburs. "If we could cross the great river, we might," said another voice, "but there are not enough of us to venture down the bridges." "I came across," said the evil voice. "A winged Nazgul awaits us northward on the east bank." Maybe, then you'll fly off with our prisoners and get all the pay and praise in Lugburs, and leave us on foot, and leave us to foot it at best. We can throw the horse country, and leave us to foot it at best we can through the horse country. Now we must stick together. These lands are dangerous, full of foul rebels and brigands." "Aye, we must stick together," growled Ugluk. "I don't trust you, little swine. You've got no guts outside your own sties. But for us, you'll all have run away." We are the fighting Uruk-hai. We slew the great warrior. We took the prisoners. We are the servants of Saruman the Wise, the White Hand, the hand that gives us man-flesh to eat. We came out of Isengard and led you here, and we shall lead you back by the way we choose. I am Ugluk. I have spoken." "You have spoken more than enough, Ugluk," sneered the evil voice. "I wonder how they will like it in Lugburs. They might think that Ugluk's shoulders needed relieving of a swollen head. They might ask where his strange ideas come from. Did they come from Saruman, perhaps? Who does he think he is, setting up on his own with his filthy white badges? They might agree with me, with Grishnach, their trusted messenger, and I, Grishnach, say this: Saruman is a fool, and a dirty, treacherous fool, but the great eye is on him. Swine, is it? How do you folk like being called a swine by the muckrakers of a dirty little wizard? It's orc flesh they eat, I'll warrant." Many loud yells in orc speech answered him, and the ringing clash of weapons being drawn. Cautiously Pippin rolled over, hoping to see what would happen. His guards had gone to join in the fray. In the twilight he saw a large black orc, probably Ugluk, standing facing Grishnach, a short, crook-legged creature, very broad and with long arms that hung almost to the ground. Round them were many smaller goblins. Pippin supposed that these were the ones from the north. They had drawn their knives and swords, but hesitated to attack Ugluk. Ugluk shouted, and a number of other orcs of nearly his own size ran up. Then suddenly, without warning, Ugluk sprang forwards, and with two swift strokes swept the heads off two of his opponents. Grishnach stepped aside and vanished into the shadows. The others gave way, and one stepped backwards and fell over Mary's prostrate form with a curse. Yet that probably saved his life, for Ugluk's followers leaped over him and cut down another with their broad-bladed swords. It was the yellow-fanged guard. His body fell right on top of Pippin, still clutching its long saw-edged knife. "Put up your weapons," shouted Ugluk, "and let's have no more nonsense. We go straight west from here, and down the stair, from there straight to the downs, then along the river to the forest. And we march day and night. That clear?" "Now," thought Pippin, "if only it takes that ugly fellow a little while to get his troop under control, I've got a chance." A gleam of hope had come to him. The edge of the black knife had snicked his arm, and then slid down to his wrist. He felt the blood trickling on his hand, but he also felt the cold touch of steel against his skin. The orcs were getting ready to march again, but some of the northerners were still unwilling, and the Isengarders slew two more before the rest were cowed. There was much cursing and confusion. For the moment Pippin was unwatched. His legs were securely bound, but his arms were only tied about the wrists, and his hands were in front of him. He could move them both together, though the bonds were cruelly tight. He pushed the head of the orc to one side, then, hardly daring to breathe, he drew the knot of the wrist cord up and down against the blade of the knife. It was sharp, and the dead hand held it fast. The cord was cut. Quickly Pippin took it in his fingers and knotted it again into a loose bracelet of two loops and slid it over his hands. Then he lay very still. And that's where we end today, kiddos. I love you always and forever, no matter what.